I'm Molly Bloom. Do you know about me?
I read your indictment after I got your call last night, and I bought your book.
Do you understand that you are charged with operating an illegal gambling business?
Are you taking me on as a client?
I don't think I can convince my partners to take a flyer on the Poker Princess.
If you think a princess can do what I did, you're incorrect. I'm getting that you don't think much of me, but what if every single one of your ill-informed, unsophisticated opinions about me were wrong?
I'd be amazed.
This is a true story, but except for my own, I've changed all the names.
And Molly, my weekly poker game is moving to the Cobra Lounge. You'll help run it.
I was in a room with movie stars, directors, and business titans. They were going all in, all the time.
Thank you, Molly.
This is for you.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna stop paying you as my assistant.
You firing
I'm
me?
not firing you. I'm just gonna stop paying you. You get paid once a week from the game. It doesn't seem fair.
You're gonna stop paying me because I'm making too much money doing my second job, and if I say no, I'll lose both jobs because it doesn't seem fair?
You don't have bargaining power here.
You are unimportant.
You know how many witches were burned in Salem?
How many?
None. They didn't burn witches, it's a myth. They hanged them. The humiliation had given way to blinding anger at my powerlessness. I wasn't gonna wait before I put a plan in place. I'll be hosting a game in this suite every Tuesday night. First buy-in, $250,000.
That's gonna make noise.
Let's play.
He spent 8 years in Hollywood and 2 years in New York running the world's most exclusive and decadent man cave.
Have you seen the other names in your indictment? Come on, Marty, just how deep into the Russian mob were you?
Your exposure's crazy.
You got 2.8 million on the street right now.
You're gonna get blown up.
You managed to build a multi-million-dollar business using not much more than your wits.
I'm about to be charged in federal court.
Well, nobody's perfect.
There's a new offer on the table. Complete immunity. We hand over the hard drives.
You've seen what's on those hard drives. Families, lives, careers will be ruined.
Why are you in this alone? Where are the people you're protecting by not telling the whole story?
I'll tell them everything they want to know about me. About me. That's it.
The theme of today is around risk and taking risk. And it is, for the financial industry, one of the most critical pieces of what we do on a daily basis. And so with that as a backdrop, we have invited a convicted felon to speak at our International Women's Day, which is most certainly a risk, I'm sure, in the eyes of my career. Risk is something I think that we could all take more of. You were a professional skier. Your brother was an Olympic champion, and your other brother is an unbelievably successful surgeon. Is risk-taking a gene?
I can't answer that because my background doesn't validate that answer. But what I can tell you is that I wasn't born with this amazing amount of bravery or courage. I was very scared of everything as a little girl. And I think that there were two factors that kind of changed that for me. One was I had a father who was hard driving. And, well, actually, there's probably three. A father that was hard driving, these incredibly accomplished prodigy brothers. And then the first time that I won anything, and I think it was a field day race in like kindergarten, I felt something that propelled me past that fear. And so I learned how to conquer it. But in my life, I think there's been two iterations of risk-taking. And the first one was growing up in this family of high achievers and feeling invisible and this really overpowering need to be significant. And I went out into the world with that as my drive. And it was kind of like success at any cost, significance at any cost. And that's why when the cost got too high, when the mob started getting involved in these games, when I was extending, because I was acting as the bank for these poker games, and when greed took over and I was extending too much credit and it became unsustainable, I decided to take a rake, meaning a percentage of the pot, which is what made it a federal crime. Because up until that point, the first 7 years, I was walking this line of I'm paying my taxes, I'm operating on tips, people are paying me a lot of money because I'm extending this credit, because I'm bankrolling the games, because I control the list. I figured out all these ways around it, but I couldn't say no to that cost because I was pursuing ambition coming from such a place of dysfunction. And so that's why I put life and liberty behind the pursuit of ambition. In the second iteration, when my life fell apart, and the thing that I was always so afraid of, which was, being insignificant, and beyond that, being, like a felon, failing spectacularly in front of the world, then I had this realization, like, oh my God, I'm actually fine. I'm still breathing, I'm still okay. And so let's redefine what that looks like for me. Let's redefine what ambition looks like, what success looks like, and let's take the ego out of it, and build myself from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. And so that's why when I took a real honest look at the wreckage of my life, I was millions of dollars in debt. My reputation was in tatters, and I was about to be a convicted felon. I realized that my monetizable asset was the story. And as much as most people said this is a long shot, no one in Hollywood's going to want to make this, they're all going to be afraid, I believed in my gut that it would work. And I believed that it would work not because I needed it to work, not because I needed the world to look at me or like me, but because I just felt like it was a smart play. And so what I did is I was like, okay, who's the bankable writer, right? If I ran numbers on the screenwriters in Hollywood, who do I like? And who tells a story from who tells a story with a lot of humanity? So Sorkin, to me, was my favorite writer, and he also, like, if you run the stats on him, he's a pretty good bet. I do come from the gambling world. And so that's why it was okay when I, sold watches, sold clothes, to go to Hollywood and to put on something that didn't look like I was living with my mom with no bank account, which I was. And when people would laugh me out of the room, when I said, I need to meet Aaron Sorkin, and they're like, that will never work. He'll never write this story about the poker princess. That will never work. And my answer was always like, but what if it does? And so finally I got to him. I begged enough, and I came at it with no ego. Like, laugh me out of the room, I don't care. I believe this will work, but I don't need it to. It's not my identity riding on it. It's just a good idea. And I kind of did need something to work, but it wasn't that. It wasn't that. Let's face it, I was living with my mom. So I pitched it to Aaron, and he loved it. And I got, and that's a moment of getting very lucky, but also having this clear vision and this clear dream, and coming at it from a place where you have really intellectually justified it. And it's not just this emotional grasping, And so coming at risk and taking that risk in that context was a very different feeling, and had a very different outcome. Very long answer.
But a complete one. You witnessed, and this is an interesting thing to talk about on International Women's Day. You were at times the only person in the room, the only women, and by far the most powerful person in the room, despite the fact that every single person at your table would rank amongst the most powerful person in a room, in any room at any time. How did you keep that power? And what did you see at the table from guys who were playing? What made them either powerful or weak? You had strong players and weak players. What made them strong or weak, and what made you so strong throughout those years to hold that power over those games?
So I'll address the first question. I was 24, 25 years old in the room with some of the richest, most powerful, most influential men in the world. And they're all sitting there. And the first time I walked into this poker game, I realized very quickly what an incredible way to build a network and what incredible way to access information. I didn't care about the poker. I just didn't. I've got a lot of things that I can get addicty about, but gambling was never one of them. So I watched The Room from the perspective of human behavior. My dad's a psychologist, and I hated it when we were younger because we had to process all the time. But it turned out to be a great skill, and a great way to look at the world. And so I realized that these guys were very wealthy, and they didn't need things. They didn't care about things. The thing that they wanted in their life was these transformational experiences. And I'm like, okay, I get this. These guys want to feel like James Bond. They want to feel like James Bond. And then there was also later down the road, there was an addiction piece to it, and that became dark. But in the beginning, in the early stages, it was about this experience that they got to walk into this room and completely escape their life and have this transformational experience. So that made a lot of sense to me, and that was the first way I looked at it. Okay, I can move it out of the basement with my supermarket cheese plate and make them feel more like James Bond, right? Penthouse suites, high-end everything. I mean, it's not so revolutionary. Vegas does it. I just took a page out of Vegas's book. Then I also realized that there was more to this game than just the poker. It was the networking. There are 9 seats in this table. You've got, and if I can control the list, that's basic supply and demand, right? Like, they're going to pay more. They're going to pay me more tips if they can get a seat at a table where there are people that they want to be around. Celebrity is a huge currency. So is money. Net worth. So I created an environment where there were a lot of deals getting done. There was people that had access to people that was really important. And then finally, so how I'm approaching this is not as like, oh, I'm a woman in a man's world. I'm like, how do I become valuable? How do I become not replaceable? How do I become more successful? Where's my competitive advantage? Because then it stopped being about gender. It stopped being about being a 25-year-old girl. And then the final thing was I realized that if I was the bank, if I controlled the credit, if I controlled the money, if I controlled who sat at the table and how much money they could have, then that was that. So it was the experience, it was the list, and then it was the bank. In terms of what made players better players, it goes back to that. Why were they sitting at the table? Were they sitting because they wanted to be entertained, or their life was falling apart and they're grasping for some compensatory action? Was it an addiction, or were they being disciplined about their intellectual thesis about poker? Were they playing poker? Were they going after personal rivalries? It just really depended on where they were spiritually, mentally, physically, and why they, and that really contributed to their play and who won and who lost.
And I know in kind of the second iteration since the indictment and as you've moved on and rebuilt your life and completely reshaped it, one thing has been really powerful to you in centering yourself and making sure that you're always operating from that place of confidence and of calm. And I want you to speak a little bit to that because I know that it's been incredibly powerful for you.
Yeah, so meditation has totally changed my life. And people would always tell me, you need to meditate. And I'm like, there's no possible way I'm going to sit down and be quiet for 20 minutes with my head. There's just no way. And so I kind of found a way in. And to this day, my meditation is not pretty. It's not prolific. I'm not sitting in lotus. I just, I realized that. And I realized this from learning, from writing a book. When I had all this information, I'm like, now I just got a book advance. Now I have to write a book. How do I do that? It's like anything else. You sit down, you start to flex the muscle. You write 5 minutes a day. You write 10 minutes a day, and then you start to. It's like So no one just sits down at a piano and learns how to play the piano. You've got to teach yourself. So for me, I started with 30 seconds because my head was crazy. And then the next day I did a minute, and then I downloaded Headspace, the app, and meditation has changed my life in the most profound way that it has changed the way I'm wired. It has changed the constitutional makeup. I have just been able to overcome these massive limitations, emotional limitations, fear-based limitations, and it's just allowed me to kind of proceed in a way that is kind of more when you just get that gut feeling and you know it's right, and just access that more often.
When you think about, I personally, I know that we have this debate. I personally think that you have had that more throughout your life than you think and than you know, because that calm, I think, and we were talking about just today, the fact that you've been able to access that place of kind of calmness and clarity. Even without meditation, but it was not on a persistent and consistent basis.
No,
and that was what you attribute to getting into trouble, because all of a sudden it became more about the outcome than it was, kind of a realistic assessment of risk. I think it is safe to say that every single person in this room, every single person in this building, every single person in this block can probably stand to take more risks in their career, in their friendships, in their relationship with their self. I think it is one of the most rewarding, kind of energizing things that you can do. What are some practical ways from a person? Whenever I'm thinking about something, I think about you, and I think about, like, I think to myself, oh, I'm taking a risk, and then I'm like, oh, jeez, no, I'm not even close. What are some of the things that like kind of practical advice that you could tell a person who, is working in financial services, or, in an industry which is, a pretty stable industry, how to take those risks, how to get started on that path?
I think when we think about taking risk, we think about sitting there and then thinking about an idea and executing that idea. But I think for me personally, the best way that I have been able to accomplish any of that, because I feel like that's jumping 5 steps ahead, is to work on yourself, is to work on fear, is to get okay with being still and eliminating, not eliminating because you're never going to eliminate it, but quieting that voice of fiction, that voice in your head that's like creating drama that's not there. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I can only speak to my experience. I really am not qualified to speak to a room on life advice, right? I'm the felon. But I think the thing that has enabled me to go big in the world, in life, was doing that work on myself. And I think a great way into it is meditation. I think I spent a lot of my life looking for that magical answer, that magical pill, that magical thing. And I mean, for me, I think that meditation is it.